She called the cops and screamed, "Arrest him!" But I was on my own land. I froze, my hands hovering over the Harley's handlebars. Karen's voice carried across the driveway, like it owned the street. Sharp band demanding. Behind her, her teenage son was pointing at my bike, grinning like he just won a lottery. "Mom, he can't have it. That's mine." I looked down at the Harley, chrome shining in the morning sun, and back at her. "Your kid doesn't get to take my bike," I said calmly, trying to keep my voice even, though my pulse was spiking. She stomped closer, waving a crumpled paper like it gave her authority. "This is an HOA violation. You can't park that here." I sighed, glancing at my phone. The state attorney was just a few blocks away, and I was in the middle of a briefing call that could make or break a family-owned business. "I'm on a call right now," I said. "Step back before someone gets hurt." Her son laughed, nudging her. "Do it, Mom. Make him move it." Karen's face twisted. "I will. I'll have him arrested." She raised her phone like she was calling the entire police force herself. A neighbor peeked from their window, watching, unsure if they should intervene. I kept my eyes on the bow, remembering my wife's training SWAT. Years of handling chaos calmly. I stayed still, letting them think they had power. "Try it," I said quietly, almost to myself. "Go ahead." The second the fake authority collided with my calm, I felt the tension snap. Karen's face turned red, voice rising. "You think you own this street? You think your call matters more than the HOA?" I leaned slightly over the Harley. "I don't think, Karen, I know." Her son looked shocked, like he wasn't expecting me to push back. That's when the first real twist hit. She wasn't just angry. She was panicking because she knew I had proof of ownership and that my call to the state attorney wasn't just a bluff. And in that moment, the whole neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. I could see it in Karen's eyes. She was scrambling. Her phone was out, fingers shaking, dialing 911 while trying to look confident. "I'm reporting trespassing," she yelled, voice cracking. Her son was bouncing on his heels, whispering, "Mom, hurry. He'll take my bike." I stayed calm, pretending to be preoccupied with the Harley. But inside, I was ticking through every scenario. The street was quiet, except for the faint click of her phone buttons and the occasional car passing by. "You don't get to call the cops on me," I said softly, letting the words hang. "Especially not with fake threats." Karen's hands tightened on her phone. "Fake threats? How dare you? I'm enforcing the rules." "Enforcing what?" I asked, raising my voice just enough to make her hesitate. "The rules that don't exist. Or the rules you printed on a piece of paper last night, hoping no one would check." Her son looked confused. "Wait, what do you mean?" I straightened, finally letting a hint of a smile show. "That HOA notice you taped to my door. I called the real HOA office this morning. They confirmed there's no violation. Not a single one. Funny, right?" Karen's jaw dropped. Her voice dropped too, shaky now. That doesn't matter." A neighbor stepped out, holding a coffee mug, clearly trying to stay neutral. I waved at them. "Check your cameras later," I said. "Everything you're seeing is recorded." Her son froze, eyes wide. He hadn't expected this. "Mom." Karen's face went from red to pale. The realization hit her that she might be the one in trouble. The phone call to the cops wasn't going to save her. And I could feel the tension spike as her entire plan started unraveling. Then, as she finally hung up in frustration, I dropped the final line. "I didn't just call the HOA. I'm briefing the state attorney right now. Every move you make, every lie you tell, is being documented." Her hands went limp. Her son backed away slowly. And for the first time that morning, I saw Karen entitled, loud, threatening. Karen looked powerless. Karen's son finally ran back to the house, slamming the door behind him. Karen stood alone in the driveway, her hands still trembling. I could see the panic starting to take over her calculated bravado. She tried to straighten her posture, like a queen who refused to admit she'd lost her throne. But the fear in her eyes betrayed her. I swung my leg over the Harley and rested my hands lightly on the handlebars. The engine purred softly, but I didn't start it. I wanted her to understand this wasn't just about the bike. It was about her breaking every rule she pretended to enforce. "You really think you can scare me with threats?" I asked, voice calm but firm. "You've been recording me, posting videos online, calling the cops, all to make me look like the bad guy. But the truth is on my side." Her face twisted. I don't need your approval. I'm the HOA president's daughter. This is my neighborhood. I laughed softly. Yes. And you've just proven how small that tower really is when it's challenged by facts. Her phone buzzed, and she looked at the screen, panicked. It was a message from one of her neighbors. Saw everything. Don't overstep. Real cops aren't needed. Karen's hands shook. She tried to hide it, but I caught the moment. That's when I realized her overconfidence had been her biggest weakness. She thought her son's whining and her fake authority would be enough, but it wasn't. I leaned slightly closer. Look, Karen, you can either walk away now and save what little dignity you have, or you can make things worse. Her voice dropped, barely audible. You can't prove anything. Oh, I can, I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out my phone. Footage from the driveway cameras, timestamps, calls to the HOA, even the state attorney briefing. You just don't want anyone to see how far you went today. Her eyes darted, calculating. I could almost see her thoughts racing. Do I risk calling the cops anyway? Do I delete my videos? Before she could decide, the first sirens rang out, not from her fake call, but from a real neighbor calling the local police to report harassment. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. Karen's eyes widened as real red and blue lights flashed at the end of the street. This is, she stammered, voice cracking. This isn't happening. The officers pulled up, to cars this time. A veteran officer stepped out, eyes scanning the scene. He stopped a few feet from us, looking at me first. Sir, we received a complaint about trespassing and threats. I smiled faintly. That complaint came from this lady, I said, nodding at Karen. And it's inaccurate. I'm on my own property. No threats were made by me. Karen stepped forward, trying to assert herself. Officer, the officer raised a hand, cutting her off. Ma'am, step back. I didn't even need to speak. The evidence spoke for itself. Camera footage, timestamps, the truth about HOA notices. The officers didn't need much. They could see the fear in Karen's demeanor and the certainty in mine. She suddenly reached for her son's hand. We need to leave. But the officers stayed put, taking notes, asking for IDs, and verifying property ownership. Karen's son was quiet now, glancing at me nervously. He realized his fun had spiraled out of control. And then came the first twist that would really make the neighborhood talk. Karen tried to claim I was threatening them, but the officers had already reviewed my calm stance and the video proof. Her exaggeration didn't stick. She turned red with frustration. This isn't fair. The officers gave her a polite but firm warning. Mom, impersonating HOA authority and trying to intimidate a resident can have legal consequences. Step back, or this escalates. I nodded politely. Thank you, officers. Karen looked like she wanted to scream, but I didn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I turned my attention to the Harley again. The engine growled softly as I started it, ready to leave if I wanted. Then, the neighborhood began murmuring. Neighbors peeked from windows, some leaning outdoors, whispering. Word was already spreading about how Karen had overstepped. Her sense of entitlement was unraveling in real time. Right there on Maple Ridge Lane, her son tugged at her arm, whispering, Mom, maybe we should just go. She hesitated, then stormed toward her car, slamming the door behind her. But before she could drive off, the officer called her back. Ma'am, please provide your contact info for the report. The look on her face was priceless, entitlement clashing with reality. Her son groaned quietly, embarrassed. I felt a sense of satisfaction, but I didn't gloat. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about showing what happens when people try to abuse power without facts. And then came the second twist. As I was watching Karen argue with the officer, my phone buzzed again. It was the state attorney's assistant. Mr. Harper, the message read, we need to discuss something urgent. Come to our office immediately. Your briefing just turned into a critical case for the state. I smirked. Perfect timing, I muttered under my breath. I swung my leg off the Harley and walked toward my truck. Giving the neighborhood one last look, Karen was still shouting, still flailing, but I knew her credibility had crumbled. Even her son had stopped arguing, standing quietly beside the car, realizing that this was bigger than a bike or a driveway dispute. The entire street seemed to exhale. A sense of calm returned, but underneath it, a quiet buzz of curiosity lingered. People were already talking, speculating, whispering about what had just happened. And I knew the real twists weren't over. Karen's misstep with fake authority, combined with the state attorney briefing, would come back to bite her in ways she couldn't even imagine. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Karen's car was still parked awkwardly, her son sitting quietly inside, both of them looking small against the morning sun. I whispered to myself, almost like a mantra, you don't mess with people's land, or their lives, without consequences. The stage was set. The neighborhood had seen the first battle, but the war was just beginning. This completes the detailed part of the story with the first major confrontation. Initial twists, shocking injustice, and set up for revenge. By the afternoon, Karen's frantic energy had completely drained. Her son stayed quiet in the car, no longer daring to shout or point. The real cops had left, leaving behind a few warning papers and the clear message. Any further harassment would not be tolerated. I walked back to the Harley, my hands resting on the polished chrome, feeling the weight of the morning. Every neighbor on the street now peeked from their windows or stood on their lawns, whispering, pointing, and occasionally nodding in approval. The truth about Karen's behavior had spread faster than she could have imagined. That's when I revealed the final twist: my secret power. I pulled out a folder and waved it casually in front of the nearest neighbor. This, I said, is proof that I own the land outright. Title deeds, verified by the state attorney during today's briefing, and video recordings of every moment of this confrontation. Gasps ran through the onlookers. Karen's face turned pale, a mixture of anger and fear. You can't, she stammered, realizing all her attempts to intimidate me had not only failed but backfired spectacularly. I smiled calmly. I didn't just defend my property today. I defended my family, my rights, and my honor. And the law is on my side. Her son looked embarrassed now, hiding his face behind his mother's shoulder. Mom, maybe we should just go home, he muttered, voice barely audible. Karen didn't respond. She slumped into her car, staring blankly at the street she had tried to dominate, and drove off without a word. The neighborhood remained silent for a moment. Then slowly, people started murmuring approval, sharing stories of her entitlement and fake authority. I finally mounted the Harley, revving the engine softly. The sound filled the quiet street. You don't fight for your land, your family, or your freedom to let people bully you, I said aloud, almost to myself. And you sure as hell don't let them do it in front of everyone. As I drove off, the sun reflected off the chrome, blinding and brilliant, like a signal to anyone who might try the same stunt. Today had been a battle, but it was also a victory, a clear, undeniable statement. Power and lies are nothing against truth and preparation. By evening, word of the confrontation had spread across the state attorney's office, the HOA board, and the neighborhood. Karen was publicly embarrassed, warned legally, and exposed for her abuse of authority. The son learned a quiet, hard lesson about entitlement, while the community realized that sometimes standing firm and staying calm is the strongest weapon. I returned home, wife waiting on the porch, smiling knowingly. Did they try to call the cops again? She asked. I shook my head, smiling. Not a chance. They learned their lesson. And today justice looked like my family, my land, and this Harley. We watched the sunset together, the neighborhood quiet, calm, and finally in balance. For once, the morning's chaos felt like a distant memory, and as the last light faded, I whispered, almost to the wind, you can't own a neighborhood with lies, but you can protect it with truth, courage, and a little patience. And in that quiet moment, I knew the story would be remembered, not for the chaos Karen tried to cause, but for the justice served calm, controlled, and undeniable. The street, my land, and my family were safe.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories.